Hey everyone, how's it going? So I'm here to talk about The House of Mirth by Edith Wharton. This is a novel that was published in 1905. It is one of the major classics of American literature of the 20th century. It's about Lily Bart, who is a young woman, 29 years old, sort of on the cusp of middle age, who is sort of living among the high, rich society of New York City. She is living with her aunt, who is just referred to as Mrs. Preston, because her parents died and kind of left her penniless when she was in her early 20s, late teens. It's not entirely clear, but it was, several years ago. And this novel follows her as she tries to find the richest husband that she possibly can. And it is emphasized at the beginning of the novel that this mentality that Lily needs to have a rich husband was very much instilled by her mother, who basically believed that you could never be happy without a ton of money. And Lily, her biggest fear is to live in what she calls dinginess, with basically living a middle-class life for her is the worst thing possible. And because she's a woman, the only real way to ensure that doesn't happen is to marry a rich man. So this novel follows her as she pursues a few different men, most of whom are vastly wealthy, and is pursued by a few men, some of whom are wealthy, some of whom aren't so much, with varying levels of reciprocation on both sides. And it just examines Lily's sort of inner life, and to an extent other people's inner life, as she navigates this really kind of screwed up society. The major theme of it is the sort of toxicity and fakeness of this society that Lily has made her way into. It's emphasized that really your friendships are basically determined by how wealthy you are, which essentially means that people are friends with you to the extent that they see you as useful, and to the extent that they see you as possibly bringing them wealth. And so basically this leads to a lot of sort of ass-kissing and pretending to be around people pretending to like people that you don't really like, and also putting a lot of value on your reputation, because of course if your reputation is tarnished by some kind of a scandal, then you will be ostracized, and people won't talk to you. And the big theme is that fakeness, but also its effect on Lily as a person, as an individual, because she's really good at navigating this world. She's, she, at the beginning of the novel, she so thoroughly convinces everyone that she enjoys being around this one particular man named Percy Gryce, and everyone thinks she's in love with him, even though she actually can't really stand him. All he wants to talk about is his collection of Americana literature, and she just finds that incredibly boring. But she puts on a face and pretends to enjoy talking to him because he is incredibly wealthy and she hopes to marry him. And the big tragedy of Lily in this story is that she's so duped by that system, so involved in that system of flattery, that she doesn't have a sort of sense of self and stable self-esteem that's based in her own self-worth. Her entire view of herself is composed of how others see her, and that's incredibly dangerous, because once her name is tarnished, which, a scandal does develop, no details, no spoilers, but, drama does ensue. Once that happens, she collapses, essentially, and that is her major tragedy, and she doesn't realize that she's been so duped by this system until it's too late, essentially. And I thought that was just explored really well. I mean, you could perhaps see this novel as being about these sort of wealthy, privileged people, but really I think that these themes are relevant to anyone at any time and in any place, because I think we all suffer from putting too much value on what other people think of us, and with how putting up a face and pretending to be nice to people for too long can sort of have negative effects on our psychological well-being. Another sort of insight that I found really interesting in this novel, that I think is relevant to this theme of existing through the eyes of others, as opposed to sort of creating your own sense of yourself, is something that Lawrence Selden says to Lily at one point. Lawrence Selden is this man who is around the same age as Lily, and you get the sense is kind of a really good match for her in the sense of that he is, like her, very smart, very sort of skeptical, very witty. He has a lot of the best dialogue. But Lily doesn't see him as a prospect for marriage because he's not particularly wealthy. But there's one thing that he says to her that I found very interesting. So he says, "You are an artist, and I happen to be the bit of color you are using today. It's a part of your cleverness to be able to produce premeditated effects extemporaneously." And he's just talking about how she, sort of on a whim, went out on a walk with him into a park, and he's telling her that she made it seem like she had, thought of it ahead of time, even though it happened spontaneously. And I think that this idea of a human life as a work of art is really interesting, because, I think that in a certain sense, everyone's life is a work of art, in the sense that, we all have our own tastes, our own, I guess, outlook. We have our careers, I suppose. We have our relationships with other people, the conversations we have with them. I don't know, even just down to, like, physically how we keep our apartment, or I guess the pets that we have. In a certain sense, our lives are a work of art in that sense. And I guess that's punctuated by the fact that there is actually a scene where Lily dresses up as a woman from a famous painting. I guess it was a thing back then for women to have this show where they dressed up as famous women from paintings. And so that seems to almost punctuate this point. But it can also, I guess, be seen in a sort of the opposite sense, in a darker sense, in that sense of Lily creating herself to please other people, in this sense of pleasing other people, having a good reputation, and trying to get a man to marry her just because of his wealth, and such. So while it's good to sort of create yourself, in a sense, I guess, to use the George Bernard Shaw quote, it can also be a negative thing in one's life. But I thought that idea of one's life as a work of art was a very interesting insight in this book, and I think does relate back to Lily Bart's ultimate tragedy. But the two major things that I thought were really well done in this novel. First was just the writing. The just sentence making was so good. Usually when I'm reading a novel, if I come across a section of the novel that's just pages and pages of blocks of prose with no dialogue, I get really trepidatious, because those parts of novels can be the slow parts that tend to be hard to get through. But in this book, that was not the case. I actually was really happy to see big blocks of prose like that, because I just enjoyed Edith Wharton's prose so much. They're just, even if there wasn't a particular sentence on any given page that really blew me away, I just enjoyed her prose style. And every now and then she would come to this sentence that would just blow my mind almost. There are these little insights especially into social interactions, and especially into sort of the little annoyances that come up when you're interacting with other people who are, flawed and human beings, where it's just these moments where you're reading fiction and you read a line and you think, oh my god, I felt that so much, but I've never heard it articulated so well. So I loved the writing. Just on top of that as well, just the plotting and the pacing was just perfectly done. I have heard this referred to as a perfect novel, and I can see why now, because it really did have this sort of concision conciseness and perfection, in the sense that everything that happens, you get the sense that it couldn't have happened any other way, based on what the characters are like, and how the characters are drawn, and how the sort of setting is drawn. It reminded me a lot of a Greek tragedy, because that's something I often expect from the great Greek tragedians like Aeschylus and Sophocles, that, the events couldn't have gone any other way based on the character's personality. I thought that this was just a great read. I think it will be one of my favorite novels of the year, and I thought it was great. So, if any of you have read The House of Mirth, then give me your thoughts. But otherwise, I hope you all enjoyed, and I'll see you all in my next video. Bye, guys.